Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, removing career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income.
Today we have a very exciting guest, and most importantly, we are kicking off numero uno in the Forbes Coaches Council special series this summer and into the fall. We'll be interviewing Forbes Coaches Council rock stars because I'm a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, which is a privilege and a pleasure. And I'm super excited to bring to you top coaches, consultants, and experts from the Forbes Coaches Council. Now, kicking us off is Petra Zink. And what we'll be talking about today is how to stand out with your career brand. Now, you might be thinking branding is all about logos and colors and maybe what you say on LinkedIn, but it's much more than that. In fact, having a compelling personal brand is a career requirement, not just an afterthought, particularly now. So if some of you know, the job search market, for example, is still quite competitive. And in order to stand out for the jobs you want, you have to have the right career brand. But most importantly, it goes well beyond that. Let's just talk about career advancement, and we'll talk more about it in a minute with Petra. But most importantly, how you show up in the workplace has a lot to do with how far you go in your career and where you go. So if you're watching the replay later, feel free to add a comment or share with your network. I'd love to have you do that. If you're listening to the podcast, give us a thumbs up, a like, or a star rating, and be sure to subscribe on my YouTube channel so you never miss a live show or a podcast episode. Now, special guest Petra Zink shares how to develop a compelling personal brand that ensures you are purposeful in either a career pivot or career move or career advancement. So today, I'm super excited to have you join us because we'll be discovering how to stay relevant in the future of work, what you can do for your personal brand, particularly for business corporate professionals like yourself, how to stand out in a noisy and competitive world of work, and why personal branding is a leadership requirement and not an afterthought. So Petra Zink is a certified personal branding and digital strategist, speaker, coach, and consultant. I found out this morning that she's also a teacher, which is also super exciting. So she's got a wealth of information for us. And she specializes in helping corporate professionals build personal brands that fuel career advancement. And without further ado, I want to introduce Petra Zink. So glad to have you. It's super early in the morning. Tell them how early it is.
It is 2:00 in the morning.
And ladies and gentlemen, she stayed up last night teaching a class until 9 or 10 o'clock your time. So you have had no sleep. Thank you for being on the Career Coffee Chat show. And it's super exciting to have you on the show and share this time with you and learn more about why personal branding is a thing and what we can do to make sure we're elevating ourselves to either those we work with or on the job market. So, I'm super curious. I have to ask, why did you get into this field? What was that spark? What was the catalyst that got you started doing what you're doing today?
Well, I was never planning to do it. Never, ever in my life.
Spell in.
I started my career, I always say my first career, in brand and product marketing. And I did that for 10 years. I always thought fast-moving consumer goods, brand and product marketing, campaign management, all that fancy stuff. This is me. And it was until it wasn't anymore. So I progressed very quickly and probably a little bit too quick for my own good because I landed in a very senior role before I was 30 years old. And because I was in a senior role, I was off the tools already. Now, at that time, and that's about 8 years ago, it started, social media and digital marketing became a thing. But because I was removed from the tools, I thought, I've got my master's, I've got 10 years experience, I'm good, I don't need to upskill. I totally slept through the changes and the trends, and it impacted my career. So all of a sudden, from being in demand, because I had a very unique skill set in that time, I was outdated. And I had two choices. Either I go back to coordinator level and work my way back up, or I change, because at that time I got divorced. So I had to look after myself. I had to pay my own bills.
It's always
it
more
isn't.
than one.
Talk about stressful situations in life. And because I had to pay my bills and I was on a senior role salary already, I couldn't go backwards. So I thought, you know what, I get out of the industry, upskill, and then come back. And my friend, it was a recruiter to start with, because I had a few interviews and said, what else can I do? I've got this experience. I've got my master's degree. So I had the qualifications, but at the same time, I felt totally underqualified all of a sudden, because every single marketing role back then already required social media skills, digital marketing skills. I knew it in theory. I didn't know it in practice. I couldn't implement it. And she said, would you be interested to become a recruiter? And I was like, no. That was the only answer I could give, because I always saw myself in this marketing field. Now, when I left that day, I thought, what is a recruiter? What are they doing anyway? Because I was placed 3 times at that stage, but I didn't really understand what a recruiter does. So I did my research, asked a few friends, and one of my friends, she is actually a recruiter herself for recruiters, not for end talents, basically. And she said, it's tough, but it's also amazing. What you do is you talk to people, you help them with their career. And I was like, this sounds amazing. Of course I do it. So I got back to the recruiter and I said, you know what, I am interested. And she said, that's great. However, our role is already filled. So bad luck, basically. So I literally, because I set my mind to it already, I applied with every other agency here in Brisbane, and they all said no. Funny enough, all for the same reason. You don't have the sales experience, and we don't think we can teach you either. I was like, there's a theme there. But at the same time, I also got in a very toxic environment in marketing. Now, I was put on a performance improvement plan. Although I was the one working hard, doing all the jobs, putting my hand up for every responsibility and project to prove my worth. But because they didn't see the leadership capabilities, because I didn't navigate through the office politics, I didn't delegate to other people, they had a very different perception about me than I had about myself. Now I had to get out. And the very last interview that I got into, and it was literally the last agency, and it was thanks to a friend who actually got the interview set up, I started my conversation differently. And I said, I know what you're thinking. I don't have the sales experience. However, what I've done so far is I've also been a PT, a personal trainer, since I was 16 years old. I know what it takes to build relationships and build my own business. So this is what I can bring to a table. I'm a self-starter. I moved to Australia. Being originally from Austria, I know how to work hard. And she gave me the job. I was like, that's the reason.
Really? Your story sounds so familiar. I want to say hi to DB Tunsil tuning in. And if you're tuning in later on, as during the Career Coffee Chat show, please do say hi and let me know if any of this resonates with you. Because much like you, Petra, I had my heads down. I thought my certification, education, and experience would speak for itself. Didn't spend enough time. I was raising my hands on all the hard projects. And because I was so consumed in that space, I wasn't taking the time to express the brand that I wanted to be known for. And it wasn't until I backed away from that. Actually, I had a bad performance review as a wake-up call. Not put on a pip, but darn close. It was sort of, you need to build better relationships or you're not getting into a leadership role. And I was like, oh, okay. Little did I know, my brand was not what I thought it was. It was very interesting because how we view ourselves is oftentimes not necessarily what other people are seeing. So if you're tuning in, let me know if you've experienced something like this, you've had a wake up moment where you realize suddenly how other people see me is not how I think. How I see myself or how I thought they saw me, and how did that impact you in your career. So you went from this career pivot and then launched into recruiting, sounds like, and then you evolved into where you are today. So I'd like to know a little bit about that. What was the catalyst to kind of launch you out? You came from this experience, you went into recruiting, you understood the importance of careers and how to help people position themselves. Sounds like to me that might be something coming out of your story there. So share with me. Am I right? Am I on target there?
Spot on. Because I was given the digital desk, and back then nobody knew exactly what digital was. Neither did I. I literally Googled what is SEO, but I worked with those digital tech professionals, and they are often, I call them the left brainers. They were extremely good at what they were doing, but I saw them over and over missing out on career opportunities, didn't often even get invited to an interview simply because the presentation of them, the marketing of their skill sets didn't represent what they could actually do. It was completely different worlds. But because I got to know them in interviews really well, what I did, I called my clients and told them the backstory of the client, of the candidate. And more often than not, they got the interview and sometimes even a job without seeing a resume, simply because they trusted me. So I thought there is something to it. I can tell their story. I can position them in a way that makes sense to the organization, saying, he would or she would be a really good candidate because of the background working in so-and-so, and the experience in so-and-so would really apply to what they're doing. So I literally connected the dots that it made sense to them. It didn't often come through a CV or a cover letter. And this is how I thought, there is something to it. And that at that time, it was also very busy in my world. So I got between 300 and 500 CVs a day. So a lot. And the ones who didn't stood out, I couldn't spend time on that. And I thought, I can't place 500 people a day, obviously. But what else can I do to help those who I can't place in the roles that I'm working on? And this is how I discovered personal branding. How can I help them to position themselves for career success without me actually having to work with them on the placement? And this is where I landed. And since 2016, it's my full-time gig.
That's so exciting. That's so exciting. And that's part of, I think, what is just so gratifying as a career coach is you're able to help people, able to lift them up. They come in and they have this need or this gap, and you're able to give them the tools and the knowledge, which then empowers them to arrive wherever they need to be with so much more power, so much more presence. And sounds like a lot of what you were doing was helping people understand how to, what I call career targeting or positioning themselves based on where they want to go, not just where they've been, because this is what happens. And we've all been there. We're looking for a new opportunity. We drag up the resume, we polish it off, add a few things, make it look shiny, and send it out. We don't necessarily understand, okay, based on where I want to go, what are they looking for, and how can I connect those dots for them? Because they won't do it. They're too busy. They don't have the time to connect the dots. We have to do it for them, right?
And often they also don't have the exposure to other industries or professions. So I placed so many candidates in for them completely different fields, simply because I saw what are they doing, what are their responsibilities in this role, and how can that translate into something else. And product development and product management was one of those roles. I often got technical people, but also commercial people into those roles, depending on their background, that they often didn't see themselves working in that field. But it's just about understanding what is required as an outcome from the role and what kind of skill sets need to go in to get this outcome. And it's not often a linear path. And this is also how I discovered the future of work concept, because some of my candidates, they were in hot demand. There were literally a handful of those people. And, some 22-year-olds got $150,000 paid because there were not that many talents. A couple of years later, their skill set was not in demand anymore, and they had to completely shift gears. And I thought, if this is becoming the norm, what can we do to position ourselves for success for the future? How can we make sense of our own background and our point of difference and position us in a way that makes sense to the future decision makers? And gig economy is a big thing. We have not only one engagement, but we've got multiple engagements, which means we have to face multiple different stakeholders. We have to pitch differently. And this is what personal branding in the end is all about, understanding what it is that makes you different based on your background, based on your experience, but also where you want to go. And then how can you tell your own story in a way that resonates with the decision maker, that they say, of course, I cannot say no to you because you all make sense. It's exactly what we're looking for. And this is marketing. So as much as skill development is a requirement to stay relevant, personal marketing and personal branding is very much part of the equation also. And nobody teaches us that. Schools teach us the what you need to do to get into industry, but not what it actually takes to succeed in this industry.
That's right. You're absolutely on point. And it's absolutely critical, particularly now with the advent of remote work and most people wanting to stay remote. I know that comes as a surprise, but I will say, pat myself on the back, I predicted this once we separated from the commutes, the long commutes and the humdrum and the being in an office and being in an unfulfilling space around people maybe we don't like, probably don't want to go back to the office. And that's true for a lot of people. So in this very digital environment, we do have to push. It's interesting. You can push or pull notifications. Well, we have to push our notifications out to the broader world. We've got a question now from Hussein, and he says, is it appropriate to choose what symbolizes a particular religious belief, even if it's not highly popular with the public, to be a brand, and is it consistent with the principles of the World Trade Organization? So that's a very deep question, Hussein. And so sounds like what you're sharing with us is you want to maybe associate with your religion. And is that consistent with the WTO and how you want to be seen? And I want to say that's fairly personal. What do you think, Petra?
It is definitely a very tricky point, because religion, politics, they're all very hairy topics as such. However, they are your brand. And if it's part of your belief system, it needs to be part of your representation, knowing that it will attract some, but also repel others. And that's actually the standpoint, the definition of a strong brand. Some love you and others hate you. If you're liked by everyone, you're vanilla. And this is what makes you very replaceable very quickly. When it comes to religion, however, or politics, if it doesn't add to your qualification because you are a politician, you are in religion whatsoever, it can often be a hindrance. It also depends how much I'm actually going in and going for it. If I'm, in marketing, does it really matter what religion I'm in? I need to know how to produce the best marketing campaigns. So I would see if it really makes a difference in terms of the qualification or the industry or the profession that I want to get into, and how much do I need to show of that, or how much could it be a hindrance. It's also, being a vegetarian, for example, and working for a meat production company. You want to align yourself with companies who share similar beliefs and interests, because otherwise it also burns you out. If, my manager in my very first role, for example, she was a vegetarian, but we were looking after poultry and fish, and she didn't eat any of that. Now, it was a constant conflict. She has to market something that she doesn't believe in. But it's not about her, it's about the end consumer. You also want to align yourself with professions where you can be your best, where you can get your interests in and your belief system. Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard.
Yes, absolutely. I believe 100% when it comes to being authentic and showing up in the workplace as your true self. It's important that your vision, values, mission, belief system align holistically. It may or may not be necessary for that to become a part of your brand unless it's advantageous for you to do so. If it's not necessarily a part and parcel of quote unquote what you do, then it may not necessarily need to be a part of your vocalized or articulated brand. However, it does need to be a part perhaps of how you align yourself with the different companies you connect with, do business with, or who you work for. Take, for example, you have some great examples there. If you're a vegan and you're working for a meat production company, that's not going to be probably a long-term position for you. You'll feel very conflicted there. So those types of deep misalignments cause frustration, burnout, and sometimes it's hard for us to actually articulate those if we're not making the unconscious conscious. So I would encourage you to think about, okay, does my religious standpoint help me? Or is it something that I just need to be aware of when I go to sign up for a certain type of role or connect with a certain type of organization? So those are all great points. So Petra, I know you mentioned that personal branding, professional branding is a leadership requirement. So I'd love to know why you say that for those people who are tuning in. And for those people who are listening, have you ever considered your personal brand as a requirement for your advancement? Because I'm really interested in what you have to say about that.
Absolutely. Well, if we take a step back and identify what branding is all about, it's your point of difference. And I always say personal branding is personal development on steroids. It's developing your personal point of differences over and over. And in the second you commit to growth, you commit to ongoing learning, which means doing the same thing what you've done today is not going to be the same that you're going to do in another 5 or 10 years. You're committed to growing and learning and reinventing yourself. And this is also what this fast changing world of work requires from us. Doing the same thing and more of it that we did 10 years ago, that may have been, that might have been the biggest asset to us because we work hard and we use this technology. It could be already, and it probably is already after 10 years, our biggest luggage. Personal branding is about identifying what can I bring to the table? What is it that really interests me? What stage in life am I? Because we're also changing priorities. In our 20s, we've got a very different drive and motivation than we've got in our 30s and 40s and so forth. And we need to let go of something to make space for whatever is next. And when you are aware of that, you can navigate it. And this is why I said it's a leadership requirement, because the more aware you are in terms of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, how do you show up, how do you want to show up, also what kind of skill sets and personalities and strengths and weaknesses do you need to be complemented by, that you can be in your performance zone. You can also spot it better in others. And this makes you a much better leader when you're very aware of those cues, rather than just having a certificate saying I'm a good leader. It's not a thing anymore.
I've got a certification. I've got an MBA. Therefore. No.
Exactly. And also being aware, okay, my skill set was in demand. It's not in demand anymore. What can I do without anyone saying to me what I need to do? What are the next steps? What do I need to upskill in? What kind of experience or exposure do I need to get in order to stay relevant? And, this is also what we are seeing, and we've been seeing for a few years now. HR and your line manager, they're not responsible for your career development anymore. You need to take control over it. But it starts with you knowing what actually interests you. What are your natural strengths? What is it that you want to develop further? And how can you get there? So a career strategy is all about where am I now? Where do I want to go? And what are the steps to get there? And this is leadership. You don't need a title for leadership. It's simply going first before somebody else tells you to do so. And the earlier you can start with identifying that and also making sense and maybe even disrupting yourself, seeing, those kind of tasks are going to be replaced, or simply I lost interest. I am not giving it all. What can I do to get back to my high performance zone before I get put on a performance improvement plan, before I get, be made redundant or whatever it might be. Right.
Absolutely. And I tell people it's your zone of genius is really where we need to be focusing on for that core brand to align with the inner self. And that's the intersection of your strengths, interests, and expertise. Because if you're looking, let's say, into the future of work and you're thinking to yourself, what I am going to do, or a large portion of what I am doing, will be outsourced or automated. How can I pivot? What can I do here? And also leveraging the knowledge that you have worked so hard to achieve thus far. So you're not having necessarily to start all over again, unless that's your true heart's desire. And if you want to quit everything you're doing and you want to become a veterinarian, then that's what you want to do. Just know that takes a lot of time and energy. So you want to plan wisely for that. What I encourage people to do, and everybody, and I know you feel the same way, Petra, is always be evolving. Because if you're not always evolving, you will become replaceable. And we don't want that. We need to always evolve, and most importantly, evolve where we want to go. If I was a professional and I'm looking at achieving a certain type of goal, I'm evolving towards that goal, I'm working really hard, and I'm not saying anything about it to anyone, what would your advice be?
share it straight away. Because often when we have to face changes, it's hard enough. And a change could be, I want to get into a more senior role. I want to get into a different industry. I want to lose 5 kilos. It doesn't matter what change it is. It is always hard. It's a pattern interrupter. And our brain is wired to keep us safe. It wants to keep us where we are now because we can predict what happens. Now, if I'm not sharing it with anyone, nobody can help me along the way. I'm not accountable to anyone either. So when things are hard, it's like, oh, just move on. Nobody knows about it. And then we wonder why we're not getting anywhere. And, especially getting into different role when we're talking about the career aspect, it's those relationships that can open doors, that can bring attention to an opportunity that we may not have thought about. And this is the power of sharing it. So not only we become visible, and I always say visibility trumps ability, but we also hold ourselves accountable because others know now what we want to do. So we just optimize our opportunities to succeed in that way if we share it with others. And this goes also with building your online profile. Like LinkedIn, for example, is such an underrated platform because so many see it still as a resume rather than a resource. Right. And simply sharing what can I do or what I want to do based on my background rather than what am I doing now. Because so many people who want to progress, they don't get approached for the quote unquote right opportunities. They get approached for the same kind of roles or level of seniorities where they are now.
Same thing.
Exactly, because as a recruiter, this is what we're looking for. You've got this skill set and they're looking for this skill set match. Nobody tells me that you are, a data scientist, but you actually want to become a public speaker. It doesn't make sense to me if you're not stating it and telling me as a decision maker that you want to do it.
Right.
So absolutely share it. And when we talk about online branding, this is part of it. How can people who come onto my profile, and this is often the first point of contact that we've got, how can it make sense of what I can bring to the table and what I want to do moving forward based on their first impression of my landing page?
Right. And use language like passionate's a little bit overused, but enthusiastic, interested in, gets excited about, focused on. This type of language helps people understand that not only, okay, where are you right now, but also where are you evolving to? What's emerging for you? Because that's important. Smart hiring managers want to hire people who are interested in what they're doing, not just because, well, they did the same thing over and over again. But it's very true. If we don't communicate, we don't share to our supporters, our network, even our direct leaders, No one's the wiser. No one's the wiser. And if you don't feel comfortable because you think your direct line managers might not support you, or maybe they're not actual leaders supporting their team, supporting their team's growth, then go around them. Seriously, do what you can to spread your goals, what you want to do, and of course, develop relationships throughout the organization, not just linearly.
That's a really good point. What we call, the proximity principle, for example. Just thinking about that you want to get into this industry, a professional company, doesn't make it the right choice. It's about experience it firsthand. And it could be simply by shadowing others, building this relationship. If it's too far away, it could be a Tony Robbins. Obviously, we can't shadow him, so that would be stalking. But, how can I immerse myself into this person's day-to-day life? So many of my clients want to become public speakers, which is fantastic. They don't see, however, what goes actually in there. Practicing over and over, recording yourself, deleting your goals, for example, resubmitting your keynotes. There is so much unsexy part that goes in to actually do the part that is the glamorous thing. And if you don't want to take everything that goes with it, that you don't want to embrace it, it's probably not the right choice for you. So taking small steps, having this proximity principle, experience it firsthand, but also get feedback from those who live and breathe it already, is a good way to make sure you are getting into this right direction and it's not just fancy on paper.
All right, absolutely. And for those of you tuning in or watching the replay later or listening to the podcast, I'd love to know, have you done a good job of sharing your goals? Because most of the professionals I coach do not. They don't share their goals for whatever reason, they just figure, well, I've been doing this, so clearly everybody would know that if I'm doing this, then I want that. But that's not the case. You have to keep in mind, everybody's so wrapped up in their own universe, their own world, everything that's going on, being bombarded from 50,000 different directions. Their brains are very busy and overwhelmed. They don't have space to think necessarily, Pam, Sally, Sue, Hamid, they are doing these things, therefore that means they want this. Not necessarily. So we have to be the entrepreneurs of our own careers, right? And every entrepreneur has branding strategy. And branding is not just about logos and colors. So Petra, if you don't mind, can you share some tangible branding tips for those people who are tuning in?
Absolutely. It all starts with your values. And when I heard it for the first time, when I was still quite young, I thought, oh, it's just another term to describe when you don't have another explanation for when things go wrong, or when you just don't have, any other reason to say something. Well, values, and I agree, values don't mean a thing if you don't put meaning to it, if you don't put them in action. And often so many companies say we've got integrity and honesty, and all those traditional values on a wall, but they are not lived and breathed. Nobody knows what it actually means. And this is where it gets murky. Whereas if you look at a list, and there's so many lists on the internet, what kind of traits and values resonate with you? What do you want to be associated with? What's important in your day-to-day life? And then also map it to an actual activity. When I say family is most important. Now, how much time do you actually spend with family versus at work, for example? You are in growth and development. How many hours or time do you spend on developing yourself further? Have you got a routine that allows you to learn? Because eventually, if we just say something but we're not living it, it's just there's no substance to it.
Your brand is your action, not necessarily
exactly.
What you say. Right.
Exactly. But then at the same time, I can also understand why am I burnt out. For example, if their values are very different to my values, and there's this constant mismatch, eventually I'm burning out because I'm trying to run uphill all the time, and I'm never in flow because everything feels hard, and it shouldn't feel hard. And if you haven't experienced the flow state when everything is easy, time just flies by, and you produce amazing results, you don't understand maybe the concept as much as others who have experienced being in flow, being aligned with your values. So it's the great start. Have values and look what resonates with you. What would you also be proud of being associated with? The worst introduction that you can get is, oh, she's a great marketer. Oh, he's a great salesperson. What does great even mean? It's nothing. You want to be known as the witty person who is the most reliable, or anything that goes beyond the great, which is very replaceable.
Goes beyond position, right?
Exactly. And then what are the actions that I need to take and want to take in order to live by my values? With that, I also know what kind of companies and opportunities I say yes to, and also people, and which ones I say no to. Simply because it looks good on paper doesn't mean it is actually good for my life. When they require somebody who works 24/7, in my 20s, when I've got no obligation or no family or whatsoever, this is probably exactly what I want. But in my 30s, when I've got different priorities in a different stage of my life, it might not be what I want. So I also need to readjust. Am I still aligned with my values in the stage in life where I am? Mm-hmm. And then I can also make it more visible. So I always say branding is the first part and the unsexy part. The marketing is the making it visible for others. So branding is laying the foundations, being strategic, and then bring it to life tactically and visually and verbally. So when we say, I want to be known for happy or outgoing or energetic, I want to also choose, when we then talk about the marketing of it, the colors that would align to it, the fonts, the language that I put out, the voice and tone that I use to be remembered as that. Because as you said, you live your values. And when you are intentional about what you actually want to stand for, what you want to be remembered for, it's very easy to say, this is not my voice and tone. I would never say it this way. Or it's not the color that would represent me the best way. Because we may not take everything in consciously, but our subconscious mind very much says they're totally on brand, which is on purpose. Basically, they live who they say they are, or it's a bit off, and we can sense that very quickly. And that then translates into your LinkedIn profile, into your resume. Everything like that is a flow-on effect.
Chris just had a question. Chris, what I would love to ask you, he's asking what tools you recommend for building website or graphics for your personal brand, which there's a lot out there when we're talking about tools. What I would love to know, Chris, is what is your focus? Are you, I haven't hopped over to your LinkedIn profile yet, but are you a W-2 professional? Are you an entrepreneur, a consultant? That has a lot to do with where you want to go with that and what you want to do with your brand and how you want to go, because there's a ton of different tools out there. Maybe you can share your favorite, Petra, to help Chris out.
Absolutely. I live on Canva.
I know, I do too. I love Canva. For anybody who has any artistic blend at all, or if you don't, because they have tons of great templates. I mean, it's super easy. I love Canva.
Yes, and they also have a color palette. So you can also see what are those colors that really resonate with each other, what are complementary colors, for example, and can play a little bit around, but also knowing what colors actually mean for others. So just because, say purple is my favorite color doesn't mean purple is the color that I should be represented by, because it also comes down to the audience and the industry and the profession that I'm in. If I, somebody who wants to stand out, then I might use a bright yellow and orange in a law firm. You wouldn't necessarily associate those colors with law, but if I want to be this person, I'm choosing it intentionally, but it could also backfire. So, as I said, this is then the more technical part, what kind of colors to choose, is based on what I want to stand for, what I want to be remembered for, and also what resonates with my audience. So, for example, my colors are dark blue and a strong turquoise, so very cold colors, because my audience, I call them my left brainers, they are quite effects-based, the research-driven. It's very masculine. So, most of my clients are men. And they're 40s plus, because they've reached a certain status, but they're still not quite happy. They know they can make a bigger impact, but don't know exactly what it is. Now, this is the kind of people I usually work with, and they're digital tech professionals. I do have also female clients, but I say they've got a lot of masculine energy, this drive to get there. And I'm not very much resonating with very creative, going with the flow, feeling touchy person, because that's not my personality either. So if I would use rose and, gold and, very feminine colors, it wouldn't align, it wouldn't make sense. So this is then, very strategic. What kind of impression do I want to make based on what I put out there? And then also being intentional about your dresses, for example, or your clothes that you wear, the accessories that you've got. This is then living and breathing.
How you wear your hair. I know that if you've ever seen me before, I will either have my hair up in a bun or like this. I try to only keep it to two different styles, and that really messes with people enough. Because they're like, wait a minute, I see your profile photo of like all this curly hair, and then you have it up on top of your head. What's going on? It's hot in Texas, people. That's why it's up. With my brand, so I have a lot of green, a lot of growing things, behind me. I've got something for symbolizing, growth and leaves and nature, because that's a part of my values, not only as a person, but as a coach. I'm helping and interested in helping people grow, and I love nature. So when I very first started my business, I got one of my really good friends who's a graphic designer and branding strategist. And I said, can you come up with a logo for me? She was, sure, no problem. She came up with a leaf. I was like, that's perfect. Because I had no idea. I was like, I have no idea what logo. But she came up with this logo, and I was like, it's perfect. Yay.
It's very intentional, what you just mentioned, because it all comes down to how consistent and cohesive do I show up. When I show up one day loud and, just out there, and the next day I'm not talking to anyone, you're like, what's wrong with you? So this is when we talk about, creating opportunities, people need to trust us. But if we are inconsistent, we are showing up when we feel like it. We have different personalities to us. We also have different marketing material, bright versus very dark. They don't see a pattern there. It's not predictable as such. And this is what can be very harmful to your brand, because nobody remembers you for something that you actually want to be known for. So it's literally just living and breathing it every single day with your colors, but more so with your actions.
All right. And green's one of my favorite colors. I love green. In fact, I just bought, I know this is so silly, I'm even sharing this, but I just bought a pair of camo green shoes. And I'm not a camo person, but I just love them. I don't know why. And Linda said, she goes, I love your colors are warm and welcoming. So yay, I've made a great impression. Good to see you, Linda. So if you're tuning in, how is this a shock to you? Have you thought about, as a professional, how I show up, even how I do my hair or what I wear matters? A good friend, Eddie Turner, he's a top 100 coach. He's top 100 leadership coach. He's with Marshall Goldsmith, top 100 coaches, and a number of other accolades. He is very intentional about how he shows up. And he recently shared with me, I'm trying to lose the tie. He's been seen in a tie and a white, crisp shirt, black, dark jacket, and gold. Those are his colors. And he's so consistent. You just know, there's Eddie. It's very consistent. So he's living and breathing his brand. But, he's just had a newborn. Things are changing. Sometimes we need to reevaluate how we're showing up. And is that now still me or not? And how do I shift? How do I pivot? How do I transition? And I kind of communicate that beyond just what I'm wearing to my broader network and for those people who are my supporters. I'll share with you really quickly, and Petra, this may resonate with you. We were talking earlier about we don't share where we want to go with our career. We're likely just to get the same thing over and over again, right? And I took a risk as a young professional. I took a risk and I applied for a role that I knew I'd never get. At that time, I was a senior project manager, and this role was a VP of operations, a bit of a stretch. I also knew that everybody I worked with knew me for my position and what I do day in and day out. They don't know my whole resume. They don't know all that I could bring to the table. And they don't know what I was super thrilled and passionate about and engaged in. So I had the opportunity, going through the process, to interview with key leadership personalities and, of course, ultimately the CEO. Yes, it was a smaller company. Irregardless, he nicely asked me, basically, why did you apply for a role you knew you weren't going to get? And I said, well, it's not that I want this role. In fact, I really hope so-and-so gets it. He was my mentor at the time. I said, but I know that you only know me for what I do. And let me share with you what value I can bring to the organization. And he goes, well, first of all, kudos for, taking the gumption, taking that step, taking that risk and stepping out. And he was like, well, share with me, what do you want to do? And I did. And about months, maybe 6 months or less later, they created a leadership position for me to do what I wanted to do. A lot of us, we don't articulate. We don't. We just say, I'm going to do the great resignation, which is going on right now. I'm out of here. Bye. But not having that conversation. Right? So what are your thoughts, Petra?
Oh, it's a perfect example, because what you did is you communicated the value that made sense to them, not just saying, I want this role. Okay, we all want things, but why? What does it do to me? What value do you bring to me? When you say, I know I don't have this experience yet, but what I can bring to the table is I can be the creative person. I can be the one, whatever it might be, that gets people thinking, saying, oh, we don't have this kind of person. And maybe it is not quite the right time right now, but it doesn't mean in a week, in a month, in a year, it opens up, because the world is changing, requirements are changing, female staff, they fall pregnant, others move away. Everything changes all the time. But being top of mind is exactly what personal branding is all about. When it comes decision time, I want to be the only person they would consider simply because they think of me, because I've planted the seeds. And so many want to have the immediate results, but branding is a long-term process. And relationships that you've fostered over years, they may come to fruition further down the track in a completely different setting. So this is the power of you taking control over your actions, how you want to be perceived, and also going the extra mile when it comes to what can I bring to others. And there's this saying, passion is what you do. Purpose is how you can exploit your passion for the benefit of others. And this is exactly what we should focus on. What kind of value can I bring simply because I enjoy it, I'm good at it, but it also adds value to others. This is how I can get paid for doing what I'm best at.
That's right. That's the whole point. Connecting that passion, purpose, and then ultimately your potential is so important. And operating in your zone of genius, as I like to call it, in that state of flow, where you're aligned very strongly with your values, who you are, your gifts, which oftentimes fly under the radar because they're natural, they're easy, you don't even think about them. And aligning with those and making sure that you can show up and hopefully in a workspace and get paid to do what you would love to do. So we're almost at time here to wrap up. If anybody has any questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to pop them in the comments or chat. If you are watching the replay later, feel free to pop your questions in the chat or direct message. Either one of us will be happy to help you. And if you're watching the podcast, be sure to leave us a like, a thumbs up, or a star rating. Now, Petra, what additional advice do you have as we wrap up the show for those people tuning in when it comes to developing their personal brand and really standing out in a very competitive climate? What would that be?
It's about realizing that the era of careers as such is over. We are entering the era of personal branding. So how can you make commercial sense out of yourself? How can you position yourself in a way that resonates with others? And we want to read between the lines. It's about identifying, why do I enjoy this hobby? So, we can think broader. It's not just the professional experience that we can use to our advantage. What am I doing in my spare time? What am I interested in already? What am I reading? What am I studying? How can I use that and create commercial opportunities around it? Who would benefit from that? And then being very intentional about who are the people I need to have in my courtyard to help me there. It may be peers who I can bounce off ideas from. It could be authorities who I can learn from. It could be those who I admire and want to become eventually. How can I get close to them? How can they become my mentor or my coach? And of course, surround yourself with them consistently. The saying, you are the product of the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most, is a very true thing, because if you only see this kind of world, you miss this opportunity. And this is also what coaching in the end is all about. Asking different questions if you want to get different results and having a different perspective. The saying from Albert Einstein, you can't solve the problem with the same mind that created the problem. Just thinking, why am I not successful? Why am I not earning this much money? It doesn't get us anywhere. What can you do to get there? Open up those questions. So also investing in your self-coaching skills, for example, if we don't necessarily have the resources to invest in another coach, this is a great way. And then obviously staying alert. What happens in the market? How can you read between the lines? And you're right, the trends that we are seeing, quote unquote, working from home, building global teams, technology replacing tasks in jobs, it's nothing new. The World Economic Forum predicted it in 2010. That's a decade ago. And now all of a sudden it's here because COVID-19 has fast-tracked it. But this is only a sign of its time. We're going through a lot more changes, more frequently and also more substantially. So the earlier you can disrupt yourself and say, okay, something doesn't work here anymore, either because I don't enjoy it, I've lost my interest, or the economy doesn't need it anymore. How can I make myself relevant again? Think of Madonna. How often has she had a comeback? Completely reinventing herself, still being the same unique person, but coming from a different angle. And this is what we want to think about. How can we be ahead of the curve before, or kind of ride the wave before it crushes us? And then what kind of steps do I need to take every single day to work on my career, not just in my career. This is probably the biggest takeout that I would ever want to recommend to think about it. Working on your career is strategic, long-term. You don't see it result straight away. Working in your career is about getting better, getting the experience, getting the exposure, becoming the expert. Working on your career is becoming the authority. How can I translate what I know in a language and in a way that resonates with others who don't have the same background? If my decision maker is a commercial person and I'm a technical person, how can I translate what I know in a way that they understand what I'm saying rather than making them feel stupid because I'm using all the tech language and jargons that no one understands?
Right.
And this starts again with self-awareness. How do I want to be perceived at? How do others perceive me? Even get some feedback. And what can I do to either strengthen that positioning or change it?
Mm-hmm. That's all great information. Thank you so much, Petra. Linda chimed in. She goes, I chimed in late, but so good to hear this. Brought something up back, from the back burner again to focus again on personal branding, how important this is. So thank you for tuning in, everyone. Petra, seriously, it's been a joy and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being flexible. And again, folks, for those of you just tuning in, it is quite early in the morning in Australia. So she has really, pulled it all out, showed up to be here on the Career Coffee Chat live show. And I appreciate it so much. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I encourage everyone to bring that personal or professional brand to the forefront of your mind, because we all have to be the entrepreneurs of your careers, particularly when we move into the future of work. No longer can we be lackadaisical about it. And I would encourage you also to make a calendar note to reflect periodically, about once a month, at least once a quarter, on where your career is going and are you working on your career, as Petra just said. So it's good seeing you all. Pleasure to have you on the show, Petra. Until next time, my friends, keep elevating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in on the Career Coffee Chat podcast. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is coacheurban@gmail.com or tweet at coacheurban, Instagram, coach.eurban, or reach out to my Facebook group, Elevate Your Career. So I'd love to learn more about you, hear your insights, and what questions you have. You can find out more about me at coacheurban.com. And don't forget, please do reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me at Erin Urban. Until next time, cheers. Here's to caffeinating your career.